Essentially, 8 focused hours can unlock 8-figure AI value. And this book
Mm.
essentially is that IKEA manual for AI for how to unlock that 8-figure value.
Books are not written to be counting a number of readers, but the impact and the value they create out there. I have a collection of books I would never get to the end of. So, how long would I take to get to the last? What drove you to write the book? I'm just curious.
Well, we've been, my company, Prescatter, we've been doing these types of projects for, since, for a while, last couple of years. And I feel like there's so much hype I feel like there's hype around the AI and
Hmm.
people, there's like this sort of scaremongering
Yeah,
and, and, and I think it kind of like people have been creating like a sense of like, oh, it's all doom and gloom and people are powerless and so and the thing is if you're in the weeds building things,
yeah,
you like not like the stuff about AGI and stuff just seems like I think there are some public figures like the DeepMind, Google
yeah,
DeepMind CEO, and even the Microsoft CEO. They're like more realistic, and then there's some
sure.
other people like the Sam Altmans and the Anthropic guys. They're like a little bit like painting like this crazy picture,
Yeah.
and so I think
Hmm.
I wanted to have like I felt like there needed to be more realism,
Hmm.
and I felt like people should know like there's some really great technology here that they can use themselves right now to do stuff with. And so that was really the main impetus. The impetus was really around, hey, we're doing this stuff right now. It doesn't really marry up with all this crazy stuff people are saying. And so people should really be more aware of this real stuff.
Hmm.
And this real stuff can really help people in their jobs. I mean, that's kind of the the kind of the angle or reason to kind of do it really.
It's good because this is coming from the field. You said 50 projects plus. The title. So when I look at the title, you're talking about doing more with less. So Dino, why would you believe that approached in a certain way that using AI would tend to the promise of your title, that it could actually amplify talent and output? And what was the purpose behind the book?
Basically, I think there's a misconception that AI is kind of a substitute for people. And in reality, if you are in the field using these tools, you know that there basically needs to be a wielder of this tool, someone who's
Hmm.
actually using this tool. And so the reality of this technology is actually that if you know how to use these tools, this is really going to help you amplify your expertise and unshackle your time from the amount of output you can produce. So I wanted to kind of really succinctly capture that essence in title. And so that's why it's kind of called Do More with Less, amplifying talent and output.
I have a collection of books I would never get to the end of. I collect more than I can ever read. I think there's even a term for it. And if I add this book to the collection, I want to get to it before. So give me a promise of how long would I take to get to the last? Is it a cover to cover read? And what is my outcome to get that output? What is the time I should be planning as an executive, as a owner, as somebody who's going to assign it to my tech team? Hey, go use this book and bring me back return and optimize
Yeah.
your talent and my bottom line. So what would be the book commitment for reading?
Essentially, the way the book is designed is not, you don't have to read it like cover to cover. In fact, you can read the table of contents and
Yeah.
essentially get a gist of the entire content of the book and sort of dive in deeper. And so as you flick through, if there are certain sections that are of more interest, you can dive in deeper into those things. So it's kind of I wrote it because I'm a CEO myself and I'm a busy person myself. So
Mm.
it's hard to read these things cover to cover. So I wanted to make sure there's like an executive summary at the beginning that in 3 or 4 pages covers the key things you need to know. And then the table of contents are very easy to skim and get an understanding of. And then there are different parts of the book really for different people who would work on such a project. So the
Yeah.
early part is really for the C-suite, and then it gets into the details of how to do the prompting and how to figure out where the kind of uh, current processes work, and those you might hand off to one of the folks who are actually building these systems. So I would say if you're a C-suite executive, I mean, I think probably the key elements you could cover in an hour, and the whole book itself is designed to be skim readable. So if you want to read it from cover to cover, I imagine you could do it, within a day. But it's really not, I didn't really design it to be read, page cover to cover, because I know people don't really do that these
In,
days.
hey,
So
swimming and reading, you can delegate. I guess there's portions of these that you promised me that I could delegate to my team and say, go read up this, but at least I need to know my structure. It is not a coffee table book, but it's kind of an IKEA, as you eloquently said in one of your notes, to
yeah,
prep how to assemble your AI and build
right.
the future. Uh, so I'm up for it. I think I like this version of AI where it could look smart enough in an hour and deep enough that I could tell my team I'm going to
Right.
delegate portions of the book if you go deeper. If I got the 4 steps, first you go in shaping your future, very different than how you do the human future. In AI, you can actually identify, then you can investigate, you can instruct.
Yeah.
What was the last one?
Introduce.
Introduce. So let's begin with introduce. What am I introducing?
So by the time you get to stage 4, you've developed, an AI system, and that system
Mm,
could be as simple as a spreadsheet plugged into AI models, or it could be something that's sophisticated, that's cloud hosted. Maybe you're using Zapier, or maybe you built your custom solution. But at stage 4, you have basically a first version of this. And really what you want to do is pilot this with this group of people, because what will often happen in our experience is that this is going to be a little bit disruptive,
mm,
because it's going to accelerate something that might have taken, like hours before might now be done in seconds. And so the workflow around that is going to be impacted.
mm.
And so if people have to change the way they do work uh, to kind of to factor this in.
Yeah,
And then I don't know if there's been like a delay or something, but people have to change their
sure.
work, the way they fact. And so you got to like rethink your workflows, and it gives your team an opportunity in that pilot scale to understand what all those impacts are and to establish
Mhm.
some metrics so you can really understand for the important things, whether that it's, the amount of time taken or the cost of doing this task, how these are being impacted. So we've found this sort of introduce phase important, mostly because um, until you get to this point, you don't fully realize the consequences, and it takes seeing it and people using it to understand that.
So, given how you had mentioned about this is active engagement AI, not the lazy AI. I don't know, we're throwing names for every AI now. So, if we had to engage with the Google, we ask a question, there's not much thought to it, it's a passive one, and let it search and index the internet and get me the answer. All our other chat tools like WhatsApp, we just say things, we don't have much thought put to it. Take our chat GPT, you're expected to ask smarter questions to get smarter answers. And the quality of the answer is dependent on your ability to think before you ask. Because if you keep it too simple, the answer is probably not deep enough. In the book itself, as you see it, in the segments of inflection points, have you seen AI harness the highest value when you find something in the identify? gone deeper and investigate that specific work component like a manufacturing company, or is instruct? So which one is the heaviest lift in these four steps of identify, investigate, instruct, and introduce? What do you think is the heaviest lift for a company considering AI transformation?
So when you say lift, do you mean workload
Effort.
or
Yeah,
leverage?
effort. The effort it takes for everyone to get in dirt and nails
Y-
deep.
Yeah, so I would say the instruct phase. I mean, I think that the identify phase is like the point of highest leverage. So you really want to spend some time like identifying that where there is the most opportunity, where there's the most recurring work, where there's a lot of intellectual work, paperwork, that kind of stuff. Because you can really like, if you pick the right thing, it can have a massive impact, for your everything you're doing. But then in the instruct phase and that introduce phase, you're kind of essentially modeling the work.
Mhm.
And so when you're modeling the work, you essentially, if you have a system that is essentially maybe creating bid proposals. We have a client that creates bid proposals for various pieces of work,
Yeah,
and essentially, in the past they would use templates, and then they would populate these templates, and and that would take some time. And now, if you set up a sort of a system where you have these historical bids, you have the new uh, bid kind of RFP, then you can essentially auto generate maybe like a 70% complete bid proposal. And um, th that is kind of has a big time saving, but
yeah.
also that requires that kind of engineering of the prompts and identifying, like, yep, you got to do a few iterations. So I would say that that's where there's probably the biggest lift. But I would also say it's not necessarily like um, a lot of work that, compared to your traditional AI deployments where you're kind of building a pipeline and, all this kind of stuff. This is not that complicated. It's really just prompt engineering with the right inputs, but that's going to be where you'll kind of maybe if there's more time to be spent, more time that will be spent, they'll be around that
Mm.
area.
How many years would you say, that you spent in the world of AI personally?
Well, my undergraduate was in computing, and I did focus on AI. And then back in 2001, you learn the stuff in university, but at the
Mm.
time, the technology was kind of more sort of theoretical, and no one ever thought these algorithms could be deployed in industry because they're too expensive. And so my
Yeah.
background is in the tech industry. I went into, I worked at the BBC in the UK and in gaming. So I have more of a high tech background. And then I really started getting back into AI kind of in the late 2010s, like 2018, 19, something like that. And again, initially it was more sort of the traditional predictive type stuff or the vision type stuff. But yep, things have evolved. So
Mm.
um, yeah.
So from your perspective, you had spent enough time to say this is not that complex. So for a AI CEO who wants to put his company or her company dot AI, don't they need talent that is very deep, data scientist, specialists, PhDs? I mean, that's a scare that most CEOs and exec suites and venture capitalists have, saying, we don't have in-house talent. Internet is flooded with TED Talks and inspiring ones, I'm sure. And also a flood of info that changes about AI by the time I read about AI. What do I need as talent to jump in between the identify, investigate, instruct, and introduce? What should be my talent prep as a company to walk in and use this as a playbook? A playbook.
Yeah, so this is a different kind of AI because the traditional AI, you do need data scientists and a lot of kind of talent with that kind of specialization. But I think what is been great for everybody is that generative AI has really brought this to the masses. So I think essentially the process that we're outlining is coming from cumulative experience,
Hmm.
and then trying to kind of simplify that into things that we know work, which is if
Okay.
you use generative AI instead of predictive AI, and
Hmm.
then you basically focus on the data sources and the prompt engineering, really it comes down to do you have talent who can become good at prompt engineering? They don't need to be good at prompt engineering right now, but are they like to have a learner mentality and willing to kind of learn the prompt engineering? And some people will say there is a school of thought like people shouldn't have to learn prompt engineering, but the reality is that this is how the technology works. But so
Yeah.
and so I think it's ability to become good at prompt engineering, and then the second thing is really just um, kind of being curious and asking enough questions and really trying to really understand how the work is done. So I really think the future belongs to the people who are intimately familiar with how the work is done, as
Got
opposed to
it.
people who are just like punching a time card and like
Showing up.
going through the motions. But people
Hmm.
who really understand how the work is done and how to kind of what makes something really good and how to keep improving it.
Yeah.
That plus the prompt engineering is kind of going to make people really valuable and dangerous because essentially they can then use the AI to accelerate the work. And as I kind of explain in the book, AI doesn't learn by itself. Essentially,
Hmm.
someone needs to kind of keep developing these prompts and improving these prompts. And so you essentially what happens is you have these what I call experts, who are experts in these work processes, who
Yeah.
really understand how these work processes work. They can use AI to accelerate that work. And then there's
Hmm.
suddenly they're completing the work on such a fast iteration, they can actually keep their learning curve can improve way faster than it used to
Got
be
it.
before. So if you're someone who used to do who reviews contracts, for example, or does file regulatory documents, normally you have to do this work. You have to fill in all these fields, or you have to write all these phrases and things. But now, if you can have the AI do that, suddenly it's like having an assistant, and it's giving you the output sort of immediately, and then you can see what it produced. You can improve it, and then you can improve the prompt. And I think it just that's why the title comes back to sort of amplifying the
Hmm.
talent and the output, because essentially
Brilliant.
if you're like that process expert,
Hmm.
and you're curious and you can learn the prompt engineering, I think that's really where the people who are going to do really well from this sort of new wave of technology.
So it's, I think, goes to my department where I want to bring in the value. So one of the CEOs recently asked me, "Hey, I need AI in my company." Literally 3 days ago in a workshop, and we said, "What's the use case? Are you trying to make more money with AI, save more money with AI, do more with AI?" That was a conversation well before we even planned this talk. And we came up with something which you may, as an expert, laugh at, but don't, because we are not the long tail super experts. We called it sales AI, ops AI, and tech AI, as in pick a use case and pick one that will make you the most money and push that into the sales AI. Pick a use case that will optimize your operations and call it ops AI. And if you want to just modernize your tech, call it tech AI, and introduce a bunch of AI tools in it. That is probably a philosopher's way of doing AI to calm down the minds of a CEO. So give us a right approach to what is the best use case to chase and what is the best case not to chase when someone's onboarding AI into their company first time using the playbook.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you provided there is a good like I would say, broad way to think about it. And so if you have a sales AI or ops AI, I think the way I would think about it is you have these roles currently in your company,
Hmm.
and actually what's happening and what's is going to continue to happen is that in the most cases AI is not replacing that whole role. In most cases, there are specific tasks in that role that
Yeah,
AI can essentially accelerate. And so your sales AI, maybe it's kind of, accelerating the process of notes coming out of sales calls or creating sales proposals, but there are specific kind of intellectual work that goes on in that role where your sort of sales AI can sort of accelerate that work and really amplify what you're doing. And so the
mm,
way I think about it is, so you have these different departments. In each department, first of all, I would think about which departments have the most routine intellectual work.
got it.
But
Mm,
even within each department, you have routine intellectual work, and so identifying where you have that routine intellectual work, and then those are kind of the use cases for that sales AI, I would say. And then how do you build the prompts and the system around those use cases to kind of alleviate a lot of that sort of busy work so
got
that
it.
people can really kind of do more, as it were.
There is a personal question I think that caught my attention as a venture capitalist. One of the things I see is the reporting, the administrivia, the analyst work. There's a lot of work that VCs are spending more time looking to do reporting and process reporting, like a doctor spends on transcripts and billing and pharmacy work, which is a terrible waste of their time, and they should be used in healing. Similar to
Yeah.
venture capitalists, the time spent is on deciding which one to back, how to scale that enterprise, and how to bring it to the world. How would a VC see these AI pattern recognitions of everyone claiming AI? I need to AI my own VC firm to be more efficient. What's the way you would think about that untapped potential in the venture capital world? Selfish question.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is untapped potential in the venture capital firm. And I think if you look at your kind of in a venture capital firm, your processes, so you have your LP side and you have your kind of investment side. And so I'm sure on the investment side, there's probably, um, business plans being sent or pitch decks being sent, and you're probably
Yep.
already using AI to screen those things. You could probably, build sophisticated prompts to with your vetting criteria for screening those things. So that's kind of one bucket. So I would look at the different buckets of routine work. So there's that.
Mm,
Maybe there's your preparation of your investment committee notes. There's maybe your memorandum for investment. And so there's like these
mhm.
um, different buckets of intellectual work. And if I was you, what I would do immediately is start using these meeting note taker apps. Maybe you already use them, but the
I do.
value is really, I feel like a lot of work happens sort of in meetings. And if you have the transcripts of those meetings, you essentially have some raw material that you
Sure.
can combine with other kind of documents to really start helping you get a first draft of many different types of things. And so I think that's kind of one of the, like, for anyone who's doing any kind of management type job, VCs or anyone else, I think
Right.
that's kind of one of the lowest hanging fruits is using meeting transcripts combined with other documents
Got
to,
it.
you know, create some of these deliverables that you need for sort of different situations. I mean, that's kind of one way to think about it, I think. Have
I
you
like it.
looked at
Now,
much of these types of things yourself, or?
the minutes part we have done. I think we have integrated that into our platform, the platform that we use, and use it as a prep for the meeting. So instead of
Mm,
scrambling and looking at information, if we had a conversation, the AI notes that's part of the meeting minutes goes into the platform and prepares us for the next meeting to say, are we ready? At a fundamental 101. In the framework of your identify, investigate, instruct, and introduce, the 4 I's, the use case that we just discussed briefly that would benefit venture capitalists because every minute for them is worth several hundred thousands of dollars if they spend it right, versus played on golf, which also is a good way of spending time. Where would it fall? Identify, investigate, instruct. Where does it fall, this use case we just discussed? Just to identify the framework of the book versus the reader and the user.
So you mean for the use case we discussed around creating
Thesis.
the
Yeah.
investment theses and things like that? Is that
Mhm.
right? So
Correct.
so I would say the way I would think about it is, okay, you and your you and your colleagues in your venture capital firm first, during the identify stage, are going, okay, where do we have the greatest amount of time being spent by ourselves? What are we spending the most time on? What's most time consuming? What that's also reoccurring. And it could be creating
Mm.
these, investment memorandums. It could be screening, investment decks. It could be, but in the
Got it.
identify stage, we're going, okay, where are we spending the most time? And then for that thing that you're spending the most time, then you kind of go to this investigate stage and you go, okay, how do we currently do this? So if we're building an investment memorandum and it's 10 pages long, how are we building it? It's probably from conversations we've had with the people we're going to invest in. So there's the meeting transcripts. We probably have a template for how this investment memorandum works. So there's that
Yeah.
piece. There's probably maybe some kind of a kind of Excel model that we need to build. There's some probable sort of, so in the investigate phase, we're going, okay, how do we currently do this?
Mm.
What are essentially the data sources that need to come together to create this investment memorandum? Then in the instruct phase, we're saying, okay, now we've identified these data sources. Let's kind of basically um, pull these data sources in. So it depends on how you implement this. So if you're kind of just going to use an off-the-shelf model or like a chatbot or an Excel or whether you're going to build something custom or use Zapier or Make or any of these solutions. So you have to kind of in the investigate stage, you're also kind of figuring out for your scale of operation and
Got it.
for your sophistication, how you're going to implement this. But then when you come to the third stage, really is like, how do we engineer the prompts so that we can take all this raw material and produce this output? And that's where you might say, there's in the book we go through, okay, you can provide examples of the past documents. You can, give it the AI a role, like you can give it background on the role it should be playing.
Mhm.
You can give it the steps that are used to uh, put this document together using all the raw information. So in that instruct phase, you're really like, and in our work we're often building multi-page prompts that basically provide these instructions. And then
Got it.
and then in that fourth stage, we're saying, okay, we basically have built something. Let's test this out with a small group, have it run in parallel with depending on how risky this use case is. Maybe it runs in parallel. Maybe it's okay if it doesn't need to run in parallel. But
Mhm.
you try it in a small scale. You start to understand uh, how this basically changes the work essentially, and then you are able to basically quantify some metrics before you sort of roll it out on a wider scale. So that's kind of the step by step that how I would,
I
how we
love
would
how
do it.
you practically brought in the 4 steps of the entire book into a classic firm that could use it. So if I was a reader of the book, I just need to make sure that I have clarity in what to chase versus trying to put a sticker of .ai on my company and pretend that we are AI. It's actually to pick up a use case or two or maybe three, no more, and then go deeper than try to give 10 use cases and see which one works. So it's not a spray and pray AI. Love it.
Right,
Fast
right.
fast forward to 5 years. Everyone's saying AI is changing by the minute. By the time we discuss this, AI would have changed already. Google would have released a few tools, uh, and OpenAI is coming up with its own John AI's magical device. We don't know when. Maybe they're announcing it as we speak. 2030, as an expert who has written deep, used it deep, and teaching it to the world to use it in their enterprises. How do you see 2030 AI adoption from your lens as an author?
Yeah, so I think what's important is to think about the things that will change and the things that won't change. And
Mm,
so the things that I think will change are based on the way I would, the lens through which I would look at this technology and do look at this technology, which is that it's essentially more like an autocomplete. So
yeah.
just like when you start typing in a few words in your Google search bar, you see suggestions for, what the rest of the sentence could be. Essentially, anytime we're using one of these tools, whether it's, a chat bot or whether it's getting it to generate images, we're essentially providing a few details and then it's kind of sort of producing an output. And so the thing that will change is that the amount of output and how sophisticated and
Ah,
elaborate this is going to
mm,
just get even more mind-blowing. So we've
ah,
seen how the image models and video models have gotten better and better. So I imagine in 2030, you probably will be able to make elaborate Hollywood style movies. We'll be able to create novels. We'll be able to create sophisticated applications. But at the same
mm,
time, you have to keep in mind the things that won't change. And the things that
got
won't
it.
change are essentially that the context that the AI needs to use to provide the output still requires some engineering and shaping and and so that autocomplete is only as good as the letters that you put in before it. And
Mm,
so, you need to pay attention to that part. And then the output is also going to be generic,
got
because
it.
if everyone's using the same prompts, you're going to start getting used. I think people in 2030 will start to get a sense of, oh, this is kind of AI-ish
Ah,
because it's very sort of generic auto-completed, and
got it.
so I think where the talent, the human talent will focus on is really on okay, like the prompt engineering, the first few words they're using, and how you're building the context of the data sources and the piping of
Mm,
that information into the model, so it produces something really amazing, but it's also really tailored and specific and valuable for that for that whatever reason it is. So if you are producing a piece of software or you are producing a movie,
yeah,
it's not generic, but because you've spent like 5 pages writing a prompt, or you spent a lot of time on the prompt and how you're putting it together for it to be valuable. And then once it comes out on the other side, you're also spending time kind of refining it. And so that's
mm,
where I believe, I think what we're going to see, like I say, sort of emphasize in this book, is what we're going to see is that the experts who are process experts are going to
mhm,
find this is going to be a golden age for them because suddenly,
mm,
they're able to get way more output out of this. At the same time, I don't think we will have I personally don't think we will have autonomous AI that will do everything
so,
by itself. And because essentially, you know, like I said, it's an autocomplete, and it would have to be sort of a mind reader. And right now, the technology is too unpredictable. So
yeah,
I don't see the the industry improving the technology on some of those other facets. I see the improvement more in sort of the continuation of that auto completion, and less on kind of the shaping of the input. I mean,
got it.
that might change in 2030, where maybe there will be something that is constantly listening to us. If they introduce something where like that, device where it's constantly listening to us, and so building context on the fly and can figure out which of that context to pipe into the AI model.
Mhm.
then you're starting to get to something which is more like the hype. But again, that's not, we haven't seen any evidence of that at this stage. So I don't know if that made sense, but
No, it does, and it's a great landscape view of how you had walked me through that journey. I predict that in 2030 there would have been a version 3 of your book, do a lot more with a lot less, and you will not be able to distinguish which part of it was human and which part of it was AI. And humans lets them be creative and spend time on the creativity and emotional side, and the
right,
humans on the computation. And it's not about the number of GPUs, but it's about the utility and the time we have given back to humans to do what they do well.
right, for sure,
Uh,
for sure.
in terms of someone who said, "Hey, I can invest an hour. I can do more with less. I can follow this AI playbook by Dino." If you had to give them, given the attention span of our favorite CEOs and executives, a 30-second teaser trailer, we begin at the end, which is unusual for podcasts. What would be a 30-second teaser trailer for the book? The give it to me in 30 seconds. What would be the trailer?
Yeah, so I think essentially, 8 focused hours can unlock 8-figure AI value. And this book
Mm.
essentially is that IKEA manual for AI for how to unlock that 8-figure value.
Like, given that, and I'm assuming that 8 figure is money, so it is make more with less. I guess so. We could make more money with less effort. We love it. I think Dino, the conversation was phenomenal because it not only was educative, but it gave folks not just a sneak peek, but a deep dive into what could they get once they invest the time and effort, not just reading the book or buying somebody a book as a gift. It is the utility of it and the energy and emotion that you have put in to bring it out. We wish you the best of lucks. This would be a bestseller not only in our YPO world, but any reader. One last question, and we'll call this a wrap. What would be a number of readers that have decorated their shelf, do more with less, the AI playbook? What would be a number that will make you happy? Not just decorated, but actually read and used it. What would be a number like that? Aspirational.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I wrote the book less to be sort of a bestseller,
Yeah,
because like everybody else, I have a newsletter, and I share the same content in my newsletter and other
sure.
things. And so, from my point of view, um, fortunately, there are a lot of people who've been buying it, but from my
Mm,
point of view, I just want the ideas to spread. I just would like because I feel like I
beautiful.
said at the beginning, I think the problem right now is there's a lot of hype,
Yeah,
and it's kind of like a noise that's really separating the reality from that's kind of confusing people, like about job displacement and all this kind of worry that people have created.
yeah.
And really, my goal is really just to get people thinking about things from a more realistic perspective. And so
Hmm.
I would measure this more in less in terms of the number of books sold or shelves, but more in terms of, hey, people doing some real stuff with this in their companies. They're coming having a better realistic understanding.
Mm,
And I would love for, I think every company or every organization should be doing AI projects. And
yeah.
I think I don't think it's very hard to do these projects. And so I think the goal is really just to create more realistic understanding across across everybody around this stuff. And you can, I have a book summary that people can get for free and stuff. So, more is just like have people having the tools and using this these tools is kind of how I would measure the sort
Your
of
mission.
the mission. And yeah, and the book is kind of Price the book
Medium.
as affordably as possible. So if people want to get some more information, they can get some more information there. But yeah, more I measure the more in terms of like just people trying these things in their work
Yeah.
and hopefully understanding the real impact of it.
And this is spoken from a educator's curiosity question, and a perfect answer that would be a dream in our world. Books are not written to be counting a number of readers, but the impact and the value they create out there. And that is the drive behind the quill and the person holding the quill. So I totally understand the emotional anxiety of how many companies has it transformed, how many lives has it touched is far more important than how many shelves has it decorated in how many libraries. Totally
Right.
resonate
Right.
with it. But that said, as people who appreciate the effort that you put in writing these books, our job as fellow writers, fellow readers, is to make sure that the voice is amplified in many places so they can get closer and make friends with AI, if that's a thing, through your medium. Wishing you the best. We'll call this a wrap.